recap the SEC Media Days last week. Sorry, I was checking out my computer here. I wanted to make sure I had a rundown of the fan day activities. I guess we'll just start there. It'll be the fans' first look at Kirby Smart and his players. A little bit different this year. Last year they had that open practice with a few scrimmage plays at Sanford Stadium. And I think that got everybody jacked up, and it sure was a lot of fun. But they're not going to do that this year. They're going to restrict it to 1 hour of autograph signing inside of their House of Pain facility, indoor facility. And of course, that'll take place, looks like between 10:15 and 11:15. There are some rules here. They'll hand out 2019 scheduled posters, and you can use those posters to be signed. You can't bring anything else to get signed, and you can't get your picture taken with Kirby Smart or any of his players. You can get your picture taken with Ugga the Bulldog if you're one of the first 150 fans in line at Stegeman Coliseum at 11:30 a.m. And those pictures will take place at 11:15. So, I'll be up front. I'll be honest here. I don't think this is a very friendly fan event. There's some dedicated fans, and I have no doubt that there's going to be a lot of people lined up and happy to pass through and get the autographs from Kirby and his players. And I'm sure for a lot of the local people that'll be worth it. But personally, I'd have a hard time driving any distance, for this sort of event. And I don't know what the right amount of access is to players. Kirby and his players have a very busy schedule. We know that. They work very hard. Time is money for Kirby Smart. When you're making $6 million a year, that equates to, 1 hour of Kirby's time is probably worth five figures. But, you also want to make memories, and you also want to be, you want to give back to your fans, I would think. And, Kirby talked at SEC Media Days about what a big role the Georgia fans have played and how supportive they've been, how they travel, how they turn out at the spring game, how they've helped in recruiting. And I would have thought that they would do a little bit more. But, he's the head coach, and these are his policies. And I guess the message is, if you want to see the players, you come to the games, or you join the McGill Society so you can get access to some of the close scrimmages. Otherwise, there's not going to be a whole lot of access. I think this also might put pressure on players in the sense that when fans do see them in public without anybody around, that's when they're going to try and get these autographs. That's when they're going to try and reach out to them if this fan day doesn't get it done. And it sounds like kind of an assembly line. You get in line and you go through and you get the players to sign. So that's going to happen on Saturday, August the 3rd, in the indoor facility. And again, no pictures with Kirby Smart or his players, only autographs for the posters they're handing out. And they'll be signing from 10:15 to 11:15 on August the 3rd. There'll be great demand. My guess is these limitations are in place because otherwise they wouldn't have time to get to everybody, and 1 hour is the allotted time. This year, unlike last year, no open practice, no open scrimmage. I remember last year we got to see James Cook and Zamir White run the ball a little bit in a few plays from scrimmage, but not this season. You're going to have to wait for the year. I do think it's going to be a special year. I do think Georgia fans are going to really like the product that they see on the field. I think this is a national championship contender. I think this is an SEC championship contender. My pick is for Georgia to beat Alabama this year. I feel like they've beat Alabama or played Alabama toe-to-toe the last 2 years and done everything but finish. You've all seen stat by now. Georgia has let her been tied 281 out of 290 snaps in these last two meetings with Alabama. So something to keep in mind right there. I'm going to go ahead and turn my volume off on my computer because I want to be mindful of any questions that you might have for me on Dog Nation as we do this broadcast. And we can talk a little bit about what happened at Media Days, what was said. To me, the big story was kind of telling in the sense that it showed me just how out of touch some of the national media are and how much work Georgia's got to do to get more respect. Dylan Moses, the Alabama middle linebacker, one of the top players in the country, was asked about Georgia's offensive line. And what he said was that he felt like Georgia was the most physical team that Alabama played. A lot of Clemson people took offense at that. Obviously, Clemson beat Alabama 44-16 in the national title game. I don't think Dylan was saying that Georgia was necessarily a better team than Clemson, but what he was saying is they were a more physical team. And Jerry Jeudy, the All-American receiver, agreed that he said Georgia was the toughest team. Georgia is a physical football team. All football teams are physical to some extent, but I think Georgia takes it to another level. Part of it is their style of play. They run the ball and they pound it. And I think that's where Dylan Moses is coming from. And, South Carolina linebacker also said that Georgia was more physical. And he kind of explained how Georgia's more of a downhill team, whereas Clemson kind of spreads you out and then they try and gut you. Whereas Georgia comes in and says, we're going to run the ball and be physical. So I think the Clemson reaction, one of their players at ACC Media Day said, well, Notre Dame was the best team we played. Feinbaum called him out. Trevor Lawrence called Feinbaum unprofessional. And all this happened just because Alabama felt like Georgia was the most physical team they played. I don't know why anybody has a problem with that. I'm not sure the New England Patriots are the most physical team in the NFL. There may be more physical teams, but obviously, these young men are sensitive. There's a lot of bravado and ego. And the fact that Georgia is reputed to be one of the more physical teams in college football has offended Clemson. And I get it. Clemson has a right to have a chip on their shoulder. The ACC is now known as the All Clemson Conference. They don't really have the second best team over there now that Florida State's weak. You look, Louisville was weak. They've fallen off dramatically. Virginia Tech has fallen off dramatically. Miami was very mediocre last year. Syracuse was the second best team. Not to offend any Syracuse alums, but that doesn't speak very well for your football conference. Syracuse is a basketball school, and best known as a basketball school, I should say. So that's going to be interesting to see how Clemson tries to fight for their pride. I'll say this for Dabo Swinney. He does schedule as aggressively as possible outside the conference. They do play Texas A&M at home this year. They play South Carolina annually. He played at Auburn a few years, and of course in 2014, Clemson played at Georgia. Georgia won that game handily. But Dabo's scheduled as aggressively as possible out of the conference, and yet still there's going to be people because of the ACC that are going to question and wonder. And that's just the nature of college football. That's how it is. Everybody knows the SEC is the best conference. Not even close when you look at the number of draft picks. I think it was like 64-26. The statistic that I hold on to when people ask me about the ACC and the SEC and are they even, I just say, well, 8 out of the 14 teams in the ACC this past draft day only had one guy or less drafted. 8 out of 14 had one or less guy drafted. You can only say that about one SEC team. That was Tennessee. This past year didn't have anybody drafted. Everybody else had 2 or more drafted. There's just more talent, more depth in the SEC. I think that should be clear to most people. But that who's the most physical thing, that really got people wound up. That was a big story. And you can go back and read that on SEC Country. I reported on that when it happened with Alabama on, what day was that, Wednesday? Yeah, I think it was Wednesday Alabama went. And then I followed up again yesterday with the South Carolina players. They played both Georgia and Clemson, so you can see what Jake Bentley and Brian Edwards says apples and oranges, but you can see what the linebacker said. I thought that was pretty interesting as well. So those were a couple of the items that came out of SEC Media Days. I don't know that Kirby really answered any personnel questions. I didn't really hear enough from him to make any conclusions. I feel like, from what he said, every position but 1 or 2 on defense is locked down. I would guess those 1 or 2 might be Monty Rice and J.R. Reed. Could be wrong. Could be Tate Crowder in the middle. But as much as they've done for Monty Rice as far as sending him to the Leadership Institute in Birmingham and identifying him as a captain last year, I think Kirby's got a lot invested in Monty Rice, really believes in Monty Rice. And obviously J.R. Reed is a third-year starter, a 2-time participant in the SEC Media Day. Those would be my guesses for the 2 established guys on defense. He said he feels really good about the 2 I've still got concerns about the defensive line. I know David Pollack said he does too. David Green is a lot more bullish on them. Not David Green. Eric Zier is a lot more bullish on them. Zier says there's 5 guys over 300 pounds. That's a lot of depth. That's a lot of size. Obviously, Jordan Davis, the freshman All-American last year, quite the player. We'll see what happens with some of these other guys as they come back from injury. Guys like Michael Barnett, this is his senior year. I believe there's 4 or 5 seniors on that defensive line. So this is going to be a big year for those seniors, Tyler Clark, players like that, Julian Rochester, and Malik Herring. So we'll see how those defensive linemen step up. David Marshall coming off the foot injury. The linebacking core, I just think there's so much talent. I just don't know who you put out there. Situationally, in terms of, having a unit out there that's insane, but you got to have a linebacker that's calling the plays, that everybody is in tune with, that's a leader, that everybody recognizes the voice. And that's why I think it's Monty Rice. And I think that's why Kirby's behind him, because you got to have the voice. I just don't think you can have a revolving door at the mic or in your linebacking core, because there's got to be a guy that gets everybody lined up. And I got to think that's Monty Rice. And remember, Monty was gone during that Alabama game. I think that really hurt Georgia. I think they could have played a lot better had Monty Rice played against Alabama. I saw that he got in he's listed on the participation report for the Texas game, but he didn't have any stats. I mean, he run on the field for a special teams player or something. I don't remember seeing 32 out there. It's a pretty special number. I think I'd identify that. Offensively, we've talked a lot about Dominique Blaylock and George Pickens, the freshman receivers. Kirby's talked about how that's going to be a position of committee. Usually when a coach has position of committee, my red flag goes up. That means nobody's won the job. That means, they're not satisfied with the frontline guys. But I think this time it's a little different. I think this time the committee thing is more based on the fact that he's going to use these freshmen because they're so talented. So while Blaylock and Pickens may not be as up to speed on plays as players who've already been in the program, guys like Tyler Simmons, guys like Demetrius Robertson, I think there's going to be some simplification going on. Most teams that run a pro-style set, they want to get to the point where all the receivers can play all 3 of the receiver positions and they're somewhat interchangeable so that defenses can't dictate matchups. But because of the newcomers coming in and their talent level, and also because I believe of Lawrence Cager coming in as a transfer, I don't know how quickly Cager's picking up the offense. I think Georgia's going to simplify things, and by simplifying things, maybe you'll see more of a coach whispering the play in a player's ear, telling them what to do and sending them in with the play. And that's important to know. Now, what these players are going to have to also know is what the audible is on every play, right? What the live play is, so to speak. Because one of the advantages Georgia has is Jake Fromm being a third-year starting quarterback and Jake's ability to change plays at the line of scrimmage. That doesn't work if your freshman receivers don't know the audibles. It's a lot. It sounds simple. They'll learn the plays. They've got a month. But to do it at game speed, to do it in a raucous environment where you can't hear, you got to pick up the hand signal, you got to be looking, you got to make sure you're lined up properly. Things happen fast. And maybe the play before you got the snot knocked out of you and you're clearing your head and you're still not sure where you really are. And I'm not making light of concussions, but that can happen without having a concussion. Anybody that's played football knows, you take a gut punch or a shot, maybe the midsection, and, that pain somehow goes to the front of your mind and slows the brain down a little bit. There's going to be a lot of that for these freshmen. Kirby talked about the adjustment that guys like Pickens and Blaylock are going to have to make to playing against SEC competition. In high school ball, because of their speed and their great physical attributes, they didn't see a lot of press coverage, because players didn't have the physicality to match up with them, so they would play off of them. When the SEC, especially against elite competition, maybe Vanderbilt or Riley Gay, you're going to have a corner that's right up in your grill. And he's got the physicality and the athleticism to match it. And so now you've got to learn a whole new hand fight game, learning to get off press coverage. There's a whole new skill set. Your footwork comes into play. All of a sudden, all those fundamentals that you were once able to get by without in high school because of your great talent, now you've got to rely on those fundamentals as you go up against players that are more talented. So those freshmen are really going to get pushed in fall camp. I'm sure already in the 7-on-7 drills, even out of equipment, they're already learning to adjust. But Kirby sounds confident in them. He said he wanted to see Wolf and Moore Cager, the 2 transfers. I know J.R. Reed said he likes Eli Wolf's speed. I was told coming in that Eli was a guy who could run in the high 4.4s or low 4.5s. So maybe he's even quicker than Isaac Nada. Now, I'm not ready to put him in Isaac Nada's category yet. I think Isaac was a special player even though he was drafted in the 7th round. I think Isaac was a clutch guy. I know Isaac caught 30 out of 31 balls last season in games. That's awful impressive. And it'll be hard for Eli Wolf to fill those shoes. Opposite Charlie Warner. Every time I talk about Eli Wolf, everybody says, "Oh, what about Charlie Warner?" They play a lot of 2 tight end sets. Yes, Charlie's going to be out there, but they play a lot of 2 tight end sets, and that's one of Georgia's matchup issues. I'm going to take a look here and see if you all have any questions for me as we do this on the Beat segment. It's brought to you by Ingles every week. Certainly appreciate the Ingles sponsorship. You saw a lot of Kirby Smart talking. I just posted a story, Kirby talking about Jacksonville. And, I talked with Greg McGarity this morning. And, McGarity is just, he's like, my gosh, Mike, this contract runs through 2021. There's 2 more years left. So I think it's kind of been an off-season story. There's really not a lot of football to talk about. But, Kirby was asked about it in Birmingham. And look, he's not backing down. Kirby said, look, my job is to do what's best for the program and take my emotions out of it. And Kirby believes that putting players in front of these facilities as often as possible is the way to go. Now, some people have made the argument, well, he's had the number 3, number 2, number 1, number 6 ranked classes. Kirby says that doesn't matter. It's a matter of getting the best players into Georgia as possible, and he wants that 12.5% recruiting bump. And as he does his quality and control and looks for ways to improve, that's what jumps out at you, is you're giving away 12.5% of your recruiting visits every 2 years. And 12.5% increase in talent is pretty significant. So that's the argument that he makes. You can read that story that just posted on Dog Nation. You can see everything that Kirby Smart said. He had more to say than that, clearly, because he was asked about it. What's going on, PJW? Some good conversation amongst our viewers. Kendall Milton and Bigsby. Guys, I'm not going to pretend to follow recruiting right now. I can't. I got my hands full covering this football team, and I'm still transcribing what everybody else said about Georgia. That'll be a Jeff Sentel question. And what I would recommend, if you've got a question that I'm not able to answer here, or just some other time when you've got a question for me or Jeff or Brandon, go into the Dog Nation forum. That forum that we have, you should have the Dog Nation app by now. If you got an iPhone, it's a no-brainer. I mean, we have got a ton of Dog Nation followers on that app, and it's really the best way to keep up with you. Pull that thing out, you got a few minutes, pull it out, boom, check it out, see what's up, because we've got stories that we put up around the clock. Wait till you see the story I put out tonight. I guarantee you're going to do a double take. I'm just going to tell you, it's not as weird as the headline states. So I can't tell you what it is, but it is one of the oddest headlines I have ever written in my career as a journalist. And so odd, I thought, should I really write this headline? I thought, but this is what it is. So I see that there's some feedback. That's not my laptop, by the way. I'm in an empty room. So sometimes there's a little bit of an echo. I apologize for that. I need to get some more furniture in here so it won't echo quite as much. Let's see if we've got any questions here, guys. Yep, Philip knows it. Jeff is the recruiting guy, does a great job. Thank you, Philip. Jordan. I see Bobby Bryan serving veterans and checking in from Hudson. Appreciate that, Bobby. My 3 years in the military out of high school were 3 of the most important years of my life. I got the GI Bill out of that, and that's what enabled me to go to college. And obviously that was pretty important as I tried to have this journalism career. So that was a long time ago, but serving your country, and everybody's got their own political beliefs, and I'm not here to say who's right and who's wrong, but I'll say this: when you serve your country, there's a mindset, where you don't really have time to think, in the sense that you're willing to put your life on the line for a cause, and obviously the flag is the symbol of that. Now, not all veterans feel the same, but that was what I was trained to do. I don't think it's any different than the guys that put their pads on for a school. They play for the G, right? Or they play for the T, or at Michigan State, they play for the Spartan. Or when you serve, you play for the flag. You serve because that was what stood for the ideals. Now, again, I'm not telling everybody do or don't. I'm just kind of, a little sidebar there. And I'm thankful for my service, and thankful for the people that support the military and our government. I think that's an important arm of what we do in this country. So that's, I don't know. Am I not supposed to talk about politics? Is that talking about politics? I hope not. I didn't offend anyone. Just kind of sharing some thoughts there. Gary Westmiller says, black jerseys for the Notre Dame game. I saw that story where Jake Fromm said he wants to wear the black jerseys for just one game. And here's the thing. Here's what this goes back to. This is the story that I was told. When Kirby was at Alabama, he saw firsthand how Alabama got charged up when Georgia came out in black jerseys. He felt like it was more of an advantage to the other team that they fed off the black jerseys more than the Georgia team did. Also, remember, Kirby played for Georgia, so he's a traditionalist. I'm not sure how he feels about black jerseys. Now, they pull him off for recruiting, and the recruits love him. My guess would be no, they wouldn't do it for a game like that, a traditional game like that against Notre Dame. My thought would be Kirby might do that for a non-conference game, a game where he's not too worried about the opponent getting all charged up, and a game where he can say to his guys, all right, guys, we did it. Maybe he'll tell them if they stay undefeated, they can wear them for their non-conference game in November. How about this? I'd be good. My thought, I don't know, again, traditional rivalry, but why not pull them out for Georgia Tech, right? Those players, look, if you're undefeated going into that Georgia Tech game, you can wear them. I'm trying to look and see real quick. I don't have their schedule at the top of my mind right now. I don't have it memorized. I should. Don't they play a pretty weak team in November every year? I think they pretty much do. Let's see who that game could be this year as I pull up the schedule. Not this year. Wrong, Mike. November schedule, Florida and Jacksonville, November 2nd. Missouri at home, November 9th. At Auburn, November 16th. A&M at home the 23rd. Georgia Tech on the 30th. So your cream puff games are September 7th against Murray State and September 14th against Arkansas State. Other than that, you got a pretty tough schedule. I mean, Notre Dame's not a pushover for sure. And, those are your non-conference games right there. Murray State, Arkansas State, Notre Dame. And that's it. That's all. Let's see here. Yeah. Because I went Georgia Tech, right? So I say Georgia Tech. Maybe that's the new tradition for Kirby Smart. I don't know how folks would feel about that. Let me take a look here and see here. More questions. Black jerseys for senior night against A&M. Again, I guess maybe that's a call Kirby would have to make, because remember what I was saying about that story when he was at Alabama. He saw how it fired up Alabama. A&M to me that's a trap game. That's a tough game. Right now, A&M scares me a little bit just because of Jimbo Fisher, and I think there's a lot of talent. And because of the way he plays now, more of a physical style of ball, as opposed to Kevin Sumlin, who ran a lot of plays, okay? And I saw this phenomenon with Butch Jones in Tennessee. You wanted to play those teams that run a lot of offense later in the season. Why? Because when they're running 120 plays a game, or they're running 90 offensive plays a game versus most teams running 60 to 65, it's almost like they're playing a game and a half. So by the midway point of the season, those teams have a tendency of being worn out or have more guys banged up. It just makes more sense. The more plays you play, the greater the likelihood of injury. And so, that's why those speed up teams, I think, aren't as dangerous in November and always seem to fade towards the end of the year. Not always, but often seem to fade towards the end of the year and are most dangerous on the front end of the schedule. I think Jimbo is going to build more of a power football approach. He does do some spread, but he does it with some authority. So I think A&M is going to be a more dangerous team later in the season than they've traditionally been, and what we saw recently under Kevin Sumlin when we've seen the Aggies do that fade the last few years. So something to think about. Brian Kephart, more hype to see Zeus or Nolan break loose. I've seen Nolan Smith 3 or 4 times this offseason, and the guy's unbelievable. Talk about a physical specimen. He's unbelievable. I think he's going to be a situational guy. I think you're going to see him play. I think he could get 4 or 5 sacks. I'm not sure he's a starter. Kirby's talked a lot about Nolan's ability to read offenses and lining up in the wrong place and how quickly can he learn it. And remember, there's so much talent already there outside of it. He's a guy you're going to see on the field. I don't think necessarily he's a starter. I could be wrong. He may win the starting job. He's that special of a guy. The whole Zamir White thing, and I know there's a lot of headlines about Zamir out there, is he's on the comeback. And again, until he gets hit, we don't know. Looks good running through the cones, seems confident, puts out some workout videos, certainly he's put his time in. Everything looks right. But the knee injury it's just one of those deals where you just don't know mentally where he's at. Lawrence Cager was telling me when I went and visited him in Miami, 1 year later, he thought he was back, but there were times doubt crept in. That's not always the case. We've seen other backs bounce back within a year, but until they get hit and scrimmaged in the fall, we don't really know. And because of the depth that Georgia has at running back with DeAndre Swift and Brian Herring and James Cook and Kenny McIntosh, it's not like Kirby's got to rush it. So Georgia's going to make sure that Zamir White is ready. And it's a long season. If you're going to play for a national championship, it's 15 games. Do you need Zamir White to get through the month of September undefeated? If the answer is no, then maybe you work him in a little bit slower in fall camp and through the month of September and get him some game reps here or there. And then maybe he's there for the majority of that SEC schedule. I mean, you play 7 or 8 SEC games in October and November. So, that's kind of my thinking, is that it's not going to be a blazing start for Zamir White and that we really won't know until fall camp. Kirby's going to keep saying he's on schedule. Kirby's not going to tell us anything more there, I don't believe. Skywalker, Nolan's 230, at least 230. It's funny, to see the fans just jacked up for the start of the season. I'm certainly excited myself. I was talking with the Georgia staffer earlier today, and Georgia feels really good about this year. I mean, there's a lot of confidence over there. Understand that this program has come a long way. 1980 was a long time ago. Everybody's tired of hearing about it. The Bulldogs have been a play or two away. I mean, they were a play away 2 years ago. They had the best team in college football and didn't win the national championship. They're not unique in that aspect. There's been other years the best team hasn't won the national title. But that was probably one of the more evident times the best team didn't win a title. I mean, they won their league championship. Alabama didn't even play in the league championship. Didn't belong in the playoff, in my opinion, if you're going on most deserving, which last year it was most deserving. Well, because Oklahoma won their league and Georgia didn't, so they're more deserving. I got into a spat. I guess I wouldn't call it a spat, but Feinbaum pressed me on that again last week when he had me on the show. You go up to, here's how it works with Paul. You go up to the stage. How you doing, Mike? Pretty good. What's new? Man, not much. I talked to Spurrier a couple of weeks ago. Not a big fan of the committee. That's right. You're not either. Let's talk about it. 30 seconds, you're on. That's the prep, okay? Sometimes I don't even know what we're going to talk about. When you see me on that split screen coming from Athens, I have no earthly idea what Paul's going to ask me. I tell people it's like going on an airplane flight. You get on it and you're hoping for a smooth flight, but you never really know if it might get bumpy. So all that's impromptu. And I think that's part of what makes it fun. It's also part of what makes it really hard, to not put your foot in your mouth or not say something you think, oh, man, I wish I would have said it this way. But I think Paul feels like he gets the most honest and quickest reaction. And certainly that was the case when he asked me about the college football playoff. And I brought up, what Steve Spurrier said. Spurrier thinks it's ridiculous. He says it's the only sport that's decided by a committee. I mean, what other sport picks its playoff teams by a committee? Right? And, my whole thing was, if you're going to have a committee, which Bill Hancock, the executive director of the college football playoff, spoke like the next day, almost as in rebuttal fashion, said everybody's happy with it, everybody likes it, look, I get it, everybody's happy with it, everybody believes in it. But if you're Georgia and Oklahoma and Ohio State are in the room talking about you, I don't feel good about that, because that's a conflict of interest. So they've got this recusal process. And when Oklahoma gets discussed, the Oklahoma AD has to leave the room. When Ohio State gets discussed, the Ohio State AD has to leave the room. These are the sitting athletic directors that are on this committee. Oklahoma, Ohio State, Florida, and Georgia Tech are 4 of them. I mean, could you pick 4 worse if you're Georgia last year? But when their teams are discussed, they got to leave the room. Well, here's the flaw. When Georgia's discussed, they don't have to leave the room. So I'm just speaking hypothetically. If I'm Oklahoma or Ohio State, and I've got a vested interest in this, which they claim they don't. They claim they check this at the door. But let's just say in the back of my mind, I really want my team in there. I'm the Oklahoma AD, and I really believe this. When Georgia comes up, I'm going to go, well, they didn't win their conference this year. I'm going to have a problem with that. So it's almost like, okay, so you can't lobby on behalf of your team, but you could essentially lobby against the team that your team's competing with. So that's my problem with it. I think the recusal policy should go beyond those 4 teams. In fact, I would say have a 17-member committee, and when it comes time every week, if your team is qualified or in the discussion or in the top 10, then you got to leave the room, period. You can't talk for your team. You can't talk against the teams that your team is competing with. And you put these alternative people in there, your alternates, right? So that's my solution. Either that or trash the whole committee thing and come up with some parameters. Like Kirby Smart says, they change what's most important every year. Come up with the list of the parameters in order. Don't make it be so fluid. One thing about the BCS, at least we knew what the playoffs were based on. So that was the essence of the conversation. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus and say they're dishonest people, because I don't think that's the case. Okay, these are great leaders and great men, but at the same time, there's a reality to this. And if you've got a vested interest in it, I do think that's something you got to look at. I know I recently talked to a former athletic director in the SEC, and he said he would have absolutely tried to bolo another team if it would have helped his team get in. And that's another story I'll have coming up later this week. So listen, Jeff Santel's got a great story coming out on Jake Fromm this afternoon you're going to want to look at. If you haven't visited the Dog Nation site, you're going to want to. Kirk Herbstreit with more strong words. Remember, it was Kirk Herbstreit last year that said the playoff committee got political. So you're going to want to check that out on the Dog Nation site. I'm going to give one more look here at the comments and see if anybody's got any pressing questions for me to share an opinion on. Dog Nation needs to offer PJW a job. Okay. And a lot of recruiting talk in here. Boy, they love recruiting. And why wouldn't you when you take a look at what Kirby Smart's been able to do? And that's part of this whole Jacksonville discussion is one more potential boost, 12.5% boost every 2 years in recruiting if that game moves to Athens. So we'll see how that turns out. I think it's pretty clear. We all know that that's what Kirby Smart wants. Apologize for looking down when I look at those comments. I hope everybody has a great week. I hope you've gotten what you want out of the Dog Nation coverage at SEC Media Days last week. There's going to be more coverage out of SEC Media Days. One of the challenges of that event is you're reporting and you're talking to people, but you're also trying to file stories, and it's hard to do both at the same time. So a lot of the information that we get, you won't see till this week, and some of it I've stumbled across and said, oh my gosh, this is a really good story. I can't believe I haven't written it yet. And remember, the oddest headline of the off-season coming up tonight. I think I've got that thing scheduled for 7 o'clock. Check back at Dog Nation tonight at 7, and I promise you it will be the oddest headline that you've seen on Georgia football, maybe ever. So thanks to Ingles, the sponsor. Thanks for Michael Carvel, my producer back at the studio. Everybody have a wonderful Monday afternoon.